Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the cEDH cast. My name is Ian, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Braden.
Hello.
On this week's episode, we have a spicy new take on a reasonably familiar commander, Korvold, the Fey-Cursed King. But before we get into this bombastic Braden brew, let's go over to our Patreon shout-out.
We have a similarly alliterative patron today. We have Cody Cantor, the commendable Cody Cantor. There we go. So thank you, Cody, for being one of our patrons. You've been a patron since the end of July, so thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate the patrons sticking through us through this tough time, and we're excited to continue making the content that you guys like. So
yeah, we took a break last week, but we did some streams and stuff, and it was a lot of fun, so I hope people were okay with that. This week we're coming back in full force with a Korvold deck tech, so
yeah.
Get ready.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to make sure that the content that we produce is stuff that we also would want to, receive. So we're trying to keep it always fresh and light for you guys. So,
all right. Today we're going to be discussing my new Korvold deck. It's a deck I've been working on for a week or so, probably just a week. It's been crazy though. I mean, it's like immediately out of the box, this deck was insane. Like I love this deck so much. So I guess what people might be thinking is like, what's so special about my Korvold deck? So I took some things from a whole bunch of different Korvold decks. So there's like Korvold decks that are on Food Chain and Ad Nauseam and Dockside and other things. There's decks that are on like Demons and Food Chain, and there's decks that are just on like Value Food Chain with other stuff. So I cut Food Chain. That was the first thing I did. I was like, I don't really like Food Chain. I found it's been like a little slow, and to me, like Dockside is not slow, and it's like a one-card combo. And this deck,
it's like pretty crazy with Korvold.
Yeah, like if you have a Dockside in play and a Korvold in play, you're probably gonna win the game. So my thought was like, instead of tutoring for Food Chain and Food Chain creatures, what if I just tutored for Dockside? Because the cool thing about Food Chain is that like you have a one-card win condition with Demonic Consultation, but in Korvold you only have Squeeze, so it's not even a one-card win condition.
Right.
And you're not in white, so you don't get to like, it's not even like particularly easier to tutor for. And in green-black, like Dockside's like, I mean, you have a billion cards that say look up Dockside. So my thought was just, what if we made a deck built around Dockside, and instead of like splashing Food Chain, we just didn't play Food Chain? So you might be wondering, well, like you can't only be on Dockside, you have to win the game somehow. You can't just grind people to death.
Which was my first question to you.
Yeah. So we are on Temur Sabertooth and Dockside. That obviously goes infinite. You draw your whole deck. You get a really big Korvold. But
important to bounce Korvold at the right time with that combo.
Yes, that's true. But you get a really big Korvold, and you can attack people and kill them, or you can use the infinite mana into a Finale of Devastation, or a Praetor's Grasp. So that's one way to win the game. And the other way we have to win the game, which is you might see in a lot of other farm decks lately, is Underworld Breach. So our deck is on Lion's Eye Diamond and Wheel of Fortune, and Lion's Eye Diamond is really good with Korvold because even when you sack Lion's Eye Diamond, you draw a card. So you'll discard your hand, sack it, then you'll draw a card. So even then, like worst case scenario, you can like maybe you'll Imp Seal or something, then play your LED, then crack LED, something like that. That's like actually something you could reasonably do. Or even just like, you realize all your hand is garbage, and you're like, hey, I just want 3 mana, like, to do something. Maybe like play maybe you have a breach in play. If you have a breach in play in LED, you're probably already winning. But it's just nice that it draws a card.
Can I say what my favorite part about this deck is by far?
Yeah, sure.
Is that you are an Ad Naus deck that is running Peer into the Abyss and Razaketh, and your converted mana cost is still 1.2 for the deck.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So our other Breach combo, Stitcher Supplier and Culling the Weak. So Culling the Weak is obviously like one of the best cards in the farm deck, but in this deck, it draws you a card, which is insane when you think about it. When one of the best cards in your deck draws you cards, like one of the best rituals in your deck, also cantrips, it's kind of busted.
Right.
And a lot of the times, like you're kind of like hoping that you can sack your Dockside so you can reanimate it. So like Culling the Weak sacks your Dockside, makes 4 mana, which pays for the reanimation spell you're playing, Then you reanimate
Right.
your dockside. You still have 2 mana floating or 3 mana floating, but now you have a bunch of treasures, so now you can draw even more cards. Like, that's how this deck is like really wanting to play.
Right.
So Stitcher Supplier is just a 1 mana 1/1 that when it enters the battlefield or dies, you mill yourself for 3. Culling the Weak in Underworld Breach, and a Stitcher Supplier, you can just play your Stitcher Supplier, sack it, make 4 mana, then replay it, sack it, make 4 mana. Each time you're generating 2 mana, and so you can just deck yourself and make tons of black mana. And so usually what we do is we just like make a large amount of black mana, then cast Praetor's Grasp a couple times. Maybe you steal like something that makes blue mana in a Thassa's Oracle, but you have Dockside, so it doesn't even really matter. You might steal a Dockside in a Thassa's Oracle and then make some blue mana with your opponent's Dockside because your Dockside's exiled or something, and then play Thassa's Oracle. You might also like steal your opponent's win conditions, like you can steal a Kiki Jiki plus a Pestermite or an Aetherflux Reservoir. That's totally possible, but most of the time you're just going to steal like a Thassa's Oracle. Right. And the other win condition is Finale Devastation, so you're making tons of black mana, then you just play out your dorks out of your graveyard, and then you cast a Finale for like 20, and that'll probably get there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if it doesn't, you can always just play your Final Fortune and just take an extra combat, and that'll probably finish them off. Yeah, so that's how the deck usually wins. And so we have 4 1-card win conditions is how I describe them. So, which means the deck is super potent. It means that like when you flip something off the top, it's very likely you're gonna like build a tutor for one of these cards and win the game. So you have Dockside Extortionist, which is not usually a 1-card win condition, even though people act like it is because it's pretty close in most decks. But in this deck, all your treasures, when you sacrifice them, you draw a card, and so your Dockside Extortionist is like really close to an Ad Nauseam, where it like makes more mana than Ad Nauseam but draws less cards. But if you can like cycle your Dockside Extortionist over and over again by reanimating it, then sacking it, then reanimating it, then sacking it, you're like actually starting to like churn through enough of your deck that's basically an Ad Nauseam. And it's really easy to do that. Like once Dockside makes about 5 mana, you're like super likely to hit a tutor, which can then get like a Culling the Weak, which can then get like a, then you draw more cards, and then you're like, okay, I hit a reanimate the Dockside, get more cards, hit a tutor, get Underworld Breach, and now you can start like manually assembling the Culling the Weak combo. So it's
you actually do have a lot of reanimation effects in the deck.
Yeah, sure. So I can actually go over that. So we're on Reanimate and Finale of Devastation, which are both like pretty good. We're also on Life and Death, where Life and Death is like a common Razaketh combo piece.
Right.
And then finally, we're also on Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, and Necromancy. So the deck has a super high amount of reanimation in it, which makes our Stitcher Supplier even more generically powerful because like it just has to mill like a Razaketh or a Dockside or even like a Temur Sabertooth or Destiny Spinner, and you're like actually like getting something interesting out of the graveyard. While like when you're storming off with Dockside, like if you just hit one of them, you usually win. One of the most common plays in the deck actually is like on turn 2, playing a couple rituals, playing Dockside, use the mana from the rituals, try to keep as many treasures as you can possibly keep. Play Korvold, sack the Dockside, crack your treasures, try to hit a reanimation spell, then reanimate the Dockside. And usually that's like enough to win you the game, or at least put you like so far ahead that it's really hard for your opponents to keep up.
Yeah, it sounds like it really is just a matter of like getting Korvold, getting Dockside, and then it kind of snowballs from there.
Yeah, exactly. And your Peer into the Abyss, your Razaketh, and your Ad Nauseam, which are the 3 other like 1-card win conditions, just like do that. That's what they do. Is they just they help you piece together a Dockside plus like a Korvold.
Exactly. That's pretty great. Now you have a lot of for those who are familiar with the farm plan, there's a lot of really like low card quality but interesting ritual effects, things like Infernal Plunge, we have Culling the Weak, we have Dark Ritual, which is obviously like a really good one, but then we have things like Rite of Flame. There's a lot of a lot of little pieces
in this
to
deck,
get you there.
In this deck we're on Tinderwall instead of Rite of Flame because Tinderwall sacrifices.
Tinderwall, right.
So it draws a card, which is kind of insane.
I love Tinderwall.
Yeah. So but yeah, like Infernal Plunge is like insane in this deck, right? Like we're just looking for ways to get Dockside in the graveyard, and when our rituals are doing the thing we need them to do, which is make mana, doing the thing we need them to do, which is put Dockside in the graveyard, and then doing the thing we need them to do, which is drawing us cards, like that's kind of insane. Like that's
yeah.
So I'm almost on Burnt Offering. I haven't been able to convince myself to play that yet, but Burnt Offering is definitely a card that we're thinking about right now. It's basically a hybrid.
That one gives you the mana cost plus one, right?
No, it's equal to the mana cost, but it's a mixture of red and black. It's any combination of
Oh,
red
I
and
see.
black. So it mana fixes while also like if we sack a Dockside, it'll be mana positive. It'll be like a Rite of Flame,
Sure, sure.
which is like a Rite of Flame that cantrips and fixes our mana is like probably good enough.
Yeah,
But the fact we
that's
can't,
fair.
and if we sack a Korvold, which like isn't actually that unreasonable, it'll make 5 mana of any combination of colors, which is probably which will help us like get a Razaketh or something. Is probably what we're trying to do in that case.
Yeah, I'd be a little wary of it not. I mean, I guess I don't know how often you have those disposable mid to, medium-sized creatures where you are just capable of throwing them away like that with a burn offering. I'd be interested to
Yeah,
see in the play pattern.
it's sorry we're not on it quite yet. But if we find that we need
Yeah,
another ritual, that's the first one that is on the list.
totally. So, can you describe like the average game with this deck? Like, are you often like keeping a explode into a Nas hand? What do you often find yourself keeping?
So usually it's like I'd say the bottom tier hands are like turn one Dork, turn two Upkeep, tutor for Dockside, turn two Dockside, turn three Korvold, sack the Dork, sack Dockside, sack our treasures, draw some cards, maybe hit a reanimation spell and try to chain off from there.
Sure.
That's a five. Like a lot of our fives look like that, where it's
Yeah,
like
yeah. Which is like a lot of decks. That's not bad. You know what I mean? Like
no,
it's not a bad place to be.
but our like insane hands are the ones where we're like fourth in turn order on turn two, and we do that and it makes like 5 mana instead of like three
Right.
mana, and then we're like immediately play Korvold. Maybe hope we have a ritual that can make it so we have mana floating after we play Korvold. Um,
Right.
that's like where our disgusting sevens are usually is like when we're like turn one Dork, turn two Dockside, play a Dark Ritual, play the Dockside, sack one of our tokens or two of our tokens, play the
Mm-hmm.
Korvold, have 3 tokens left over somehow, sack our 3 tokens, Ancestral Recall, hit a reanimation spell, reanimate our Dockside, like, and then if
Yeah.
Dockside's making like 5 treasures, I mean that's like your reanimation spells are gonna draw fives. That's like the insane starts, right? But our
Right.
like our bottom tier starts are like we mold to 5. We just have a Dork, 2 lands, and like a Wardly tutor. Also, like Imperial Steel's pretty good. It's interesting. Like usually you're just tutoring for Dockside. That's what I'll say. Is like the most amount of tutors in the deck tutor for Dockside, and most amount of time your hand doesn't have an enabler. Like we only have Razaketh, which is like not what you want your hand. Dockside ad nauseum peer into the abyss. But usually,
Mm-hmm.
like we have an enabler in the command zone, and we have tons of tutors that get one card, and so like our one card is going to be Dockside, and we're going to try to play our Dockside into our enabler, which is Korvold, and then like try to hit a reanimation spell off the top. And we're on like 5 or 6 reanimation spells, so it's really not that unreasonable. Like any tutor we get gets us back Dockside because like it just tutors for a reanimation spell, and then any of those 5 cards is like a live draw, you know. And then
Gotcha.
all of our fetch lands are now drawing us cards, like because Korvold's in play. So that's like a really
Mhm.
strong start for us. It's like turn two Korvold or turn three
Now,
Korvold.
because I assume because of the just churn that Korvold has, do you find yourself ever like just running out of gas? Because I mean, the deck seems like it's very focused on doing one thing, and then I
Yeah,
just wouldn't know how it would do after that
yeah. So
scenario.
like if you run out of gas, I guess I'll say this: I've never had games go long enough where like we've run out of gas and like I had a game where I hit 10 lands off the top. So like I
Hmm.
just did the thing that I'm talking about where I had the reanimation spell in my starting hand. I was able to do it the turn two Korvold, sack Dockside, turn three reanimate Dockside. I like hit calling the week to my Dockside, then I hit a Ugmas Will, a Yamas Will, calling the week, Dockside, you know. I did all that, drew like 10 cards, and I hit all lands.
Yeah.
And like a calling the week. And so like that's gonna happen sometimes, and I think you just lose those games. But there's gonna be
Yeah.
the deck is so much gas, like I've cut all the interaction basically. There's like no interaction in this deck. There's like Autumn's Veil, Nature's Claim,
The
Veil of
blasts.
Summer,
Yeah.
the Blasts, and Abrupt Decay, and that's like in Deflecting Swat. That's it. That's like all the interaction in the deck. So like what I filled those things with are Mana Rocks and Mana Dorks and gas. So usually like running out of gas, like if that happens, we probably still have a Korvold in play,
Yeah.
you know, and we're probably just beating people down, trying to draw like 1 or 2 cards a turn. And if it's
Yeah.
hard to like attack people for 13 and not and draw 3 cards a turn and not eventually hit something.
Right.
I'll say this: like Korvold is probably of all the farm decks I've seen so far, I think Korvold is the best card advantage engine of all of them.
Okay.
But he's in Jund, and so you have to be like
Yeah.
you can't like be interactive because you're in Jund, and so you have like a couple options. And in my opinion, it's like I'd rather just go all in and like win games quickly and get under even the farm decks, you know?
Yeah. And do you find that that's been successful? I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like real greedy from this angle.
Oh, it is
So,
greedy. It's intentionally greedy. You're trying to
yeah.
outgreed some of the greediest decks in the format, you know?
Gotcha.
Like,
Gotcha.
but the thing is we also have cards like Survival of the Fittest, Squandered Resources, Underworld Breach. These cards like help us like to dig aggressively. So like if you play Squandered Resources with a Korvold in play and just sack all of your lands, it's really hard not to win because you're probably drawing like 6 or 7 cards and making 6 or 7 mana. How often do you Wheel of Fortune and just hit all lands? Not very often. Sometimes you do.
No.
But if you hit like a tutor, you win. You're gonna win because you can get your reanimate your dockside, or go get a dockside, play the dockside, draw 7 more cards, like in these like late game stages. So
I love the inclusion of Emergent Zone in the land slot. It's real spicy.
yeah,
With
so
Korvold.
I'll talk about that actually. So Emergent Zone is a very powerful card in our deck that also sits alongside Final Fortune. So in addition to being on Ad Nauseam and Peer into the Abyss, we're also on Necropotence. And so there's a very interesting synergy where you can do some degenerate stuff where like you crop rotation for Emergent Zone in your end step. Then you crack your Emergent Zone, you draw a card, and then you can start going off during your end step.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Additionally, if you hit a Final Fortune and have 2 red mana up, which is like a reason if you're playing Necro to always kind of leave some red mana up, you can take an extra turn at instant speed. And so you can take an extra turn during your end step. Or if you feel like you want the player after you in turn order is going to try to go for it, you can wait till they go for it, get stopped while everyone's tapped out, and the control player is going to untap. You Final Fortune during the end step.
Yeah.
The like thing that people like to say is like in response to your opponent activating Thrasios is like when you do it, like that's the kind of like
totally.
that's the like get them. But in reality, it doesn't really matter. Like if your opponent's just like had a huge counter battle, like just go for it with Final Fortune, and you'll probably win most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can think of Final Fortune as like a counter spell, but greedier. Like,
yeah.
It's also like a ritual, but greedier.
Totally.
A lot of the time, like you'll play your Peer into the Abyss, you'll draw half your deck, and you're like, I have all these cards I need to play, but I don't have any mana because I just like spent 7 mana on Peer into the Abyss. You can be like, exile my Simian Spirit Guide, play my Lotus Petal Final Fortune, and then like discard down to hand size, basically putting Underworld Breach in your hand, and then like you win. So
I really, now that we talk about this, I really like Final Fortune in this current meta.
I agree.
As we've had very extensive conversations off mic, basically about how one of the most important things to be doing right now in this meta is like being able to act when the time is opportune and not just lose to like turn order. So having something like Final Fortune is really great to, as you mentioned, like at that one time when everyone's just done answering one player and the next person goes to untap, and if instead you can for 2 red mana capitalize and say, no, I think I'm going to win the game now.
Yeah. I've resolved Final Fortune maybe 8 or 9 times now, and I think I've only lost the game once. So like the card has huge like conversion potential. Like
I've always been a big fan of that card, but it's I think it's really good in this spot.
Yeah, if it wasn't an instant, it would still be probably almost good enough. But the fact that it lets you mess with turn order is like super abusable.
Have you thought about the other versions of it as well, or?
Yeah. I think 2 copies is like probably the right number if it was an instant. If they were both instants, and I think one of them being a sorcery is just kind of like it really depends on like how badly you need the ritual.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like that a lot. That and Emergent Zone. I really like that in these metas, especially with such. I mean, this is if there's one word to describe this deck, it is explosive. So
yeah,
just
it's like
getting
really,
a turn out of nowhere is.
Yeah, this deck is really trying to just like win in response to like everyone having tapped out. Like
totally.
We're not playing a lot of interaction because we're in Jund, and it's like. I'd rather win, like, if you think of, like, Final Fortune, right? If Final Fortune was an Assassin's Trophy, it'd be way worse. Like, these slots have to come from somewhere, right?
Right.
And the interaction in Jund is just, like, leaves a lot to be desired. And
totally.
I just am not.
I do have to say, whenever I see Korvold at the table, I'm usually, like, not impressed. Like, I've very much been unimpressed by that deck up until now, and the only times that I have been impressed are when it starts doing the dockside thing. So like this deck being the full tilt abuse version of that, of that strategy, of that archetype, I feel like is really working with some gas here.
Yeah, I mean, Dockside's broken, and so the deck that breaks it
Yeah.
best is going to be good, at
Yeah.
least. You know.
Speaking of Dockside being broken, let's talk about Wishclaw Talisman, because you and I have
Oh
once
my
again
god.
another off mic conversation. But
Yeah.
with Dockside, this card just keeps having more and more
I
utility.
cannot tell you. I cannot tell you how fun this card is. The best is when your opponents were playing it. So I had a game the other day where my opponents had 3 artifacts and enchantments in play, and to make infinite mana in Korvold, you need your opponents to have 5. And so I Praetor's Grasped one of my opponents to get their Wishclaw. I played their Wishclaw, gave it back to them. I tutored up my Wishclaw, played it, gave it back to them, and then played my Dockside and made 5 mana and went off and made infinite mana. So that is like a ridiculous amount of mana play, but I had been storming off using my opponent's Dockside up to that point, which is a thing you can do in this deck, which is really funny. I had an Underworld Breach and an Animate Dead in play, and so I was culling the week, my opponent's Dockside, then replaying Animate Dead, stealing back the Dockside, culling the week their Dockside. I was doing that, drawing and drawing, digging until I could hit a win condition. So,
Right.
One win condition I did forget to mention is a lot of the times if you are doing the wheel plan where you like have wheel LED,
Yeah.
you'll mill an opponent's win condition that's a creature, like a Thassa's Oracle.
Sure.
And so you're like you can just
reanimate it.
Yeah, you can just animate dead the Thassa's Oracle and win the game that way. So
That's pretty spicy.
yeah, that's like the deck is on very few win conditions, but it's largely because like
It doesn't need them.
yeah, like we're trying to like just get so much card advantage that it doesn't really matter how we win.
Yeah.
And Praetor's Grasp.
So that's my question. Is it when it is going off, it seems like it can do the thing pretty well, but I just feel like there are definitely points where because you have to use your opponent's win conditions and because it's so interaction light, like just a well placed counterspell can really hit this deck a little more than the average farm deck.
Yeah, it's true. The thing is like the correct time to do it is the Dockside, and if you don't do it, then it's too late. Because like at a certain point, like most of our win conditions are actually creature based, right?
Yeah, actually, that brings up a funny story. I was talking to someone on the Thrasios Incorporated Discord the other day, and I switched a line around. They were like, don't you think maybe with 2 Dockside wins that people will start countering Dockside? And my response was, they probably should.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really good card. You probably should counter that spell.
Yeah, like I had a game the other day where I was like, wow, I lose to 2 counterspells in the game right here, but otherwise I win. And they were
Yeah.
Unsubstantiate and Delay, because my hand had tons of reanimation spells in it, and I had ways to sack my creatures. And I was going to Dockside like 30 times. Like, they can counter the Culling the Week. It doesn't matter. The Dockside's in the graveyard, So I had what I lost to was Unsubstantiate or Delay. They had the Unsubstantiate, and I didn't lose the game. I think I still won, but I didn't win the game right there. I think like the fact this deck runs so much reanimation, it means that like if they counter Dockside, I just reanimate Dockside. Like I'm on 5 reanimation pieces. Like that's like so many that it's not absurd to just say like, oh, I have that too.
I gotta say, this deck looks fun. Like, it looks
it's a blast.
just genuinely fun,
Oh, it is a blast. And one thing I will say is, like, the less win conditions your deck has, the more fun your deck is to play.
Yeah.
Which sounds absurd, but, like, being forced to, like, make it out of nothing sometimes, where you're like, I don't have enough cards in my graveyard to be able to, like, cast Praetor's Grasp more than twice. It's like, how do I... And I don't know if I can deck myself safely. Like, how am I going to do this? And you make it work, and that's a lot of fun. One thing I do want to talk about is, like, rocks versus dorks.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing a lot of like ad nauseum players will say is like rocks are better than dorks because you can like ritual them, and that's largely true. Like being able to like dark ritual into a talisman, into a Felwar Stone, into like I don't know a ponder or something is like kind of busted, right? Like But in this deck, we are still running our dark rituals and our Felwar Stones and arcane signets and talismans, right? Like we're still on those cards. But we're also on dorks. So, like, this is another situation where it's like, where are the slots coming from? They're coming from the interaction. Like, we're not on 16 counterspells. We're on 4. In a normal deck where, like, you'd be playing tons of interactive spells, I'm just playing Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, Deathrite Shaman, Elves of Deep Shadow, the dorks, Derogatory Speakers currently being tested, Tinderwall. Those cards are great because I'm on Infernal Plunge and I'm on Coin of the Week. Like, I want dorks in my deck to sack to these cards.
Right.
While also, like, I'm on Gaia's Cradle, so I want Gaia's Cradle to be making, lots of mana.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I found, like, with Gaia's Cradle is it lets me have extra mana left over after I've docksided. Like, just even, like, 1 or 2 mana left over after I've docksided into Korvold is, like, really kind of, which is really key. Like, the 3 green off of a Gaia's Cradle means I only need to spend 2 treasures on Korvold,
Right.
Which is, like, kind of important. Beyond Dorks lets you, like, play those kinds of cards, which I think is really powerful. The whole deck is just devoted to mana. It's like a shrine to mana. Like,
yeah, totally. And Korvold just generates enough card draw that it doesn't really need much else.
It basically gives,
right?
like, your mana vault cycling and your docksides into Ancestrals, like, your Tinder Walls.
Yeah, that's true.
There's enough cards that say Sacrifice on them in this deck that also say make mana that it's, like, really powerful. Another reason to be on Dorks is it lets you play Eldritch Evolution. So you can, like, Eldritch Evolution a Dork for a Dockside. So, like, when you do that with a Korvold in play, it's insane because you sack the Dork, you draw a card, you get Dockside out, you draw 4 more cards. Like, it's all mana positive because you're getting a Dockside. So that's really impressive in my experience. Yeah, this deck is, like, it's just trying to chain mana together until it wins the game. Like a Rain of Filth, like where Rain of Filth is, like, broken in a lot of farm decks because it just is so mana positive. It just, like, the turns you need 4 mana, it makes 4 mana. In this deck, it makes 4 mana and draws 4 cards, or more.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Depending on how late in the game you are. So, it's pretty nuts. This deck's just a blast,
I mean, it looks fun. It looks like a blast to play.
Yeah, and, like, you may say, like, hey, Food Chain's only 2 slots. Well, Food Chain's really more than that. I mean, if you look at this list right now, I don't have a way to win the game if I add Food Chain and Squee, really.
Totally.
I don't have any way right now of converting that mana. So now I need to add, like, a Mayhem Devil, I guess. Now it's, like, 4 slots. It's, like, Demonic Consultation, Food Chain, Mayhem Devil, Squee. And then it's, like, are those 4 slots really better than, like, Infernal Tutor, both Spirit Guides, you have to start, like, actually seriously looking at cuts, and those, I don't even think those lines are very impressive. And the card quality is very poor. If you compare, like, Stitcher Supplier to Squee, I think Stitcher Supplier is far better. It's a really nice, like, it's almost like a card advantage engine, really, because, like, we run so many reanimation spells that just a turn 2 Stitcher Supplier into a turn 3 Korvold can turn on a lot of our reanimation spells. It also feeds an early breach, which is really nice. Even if we're not comboing off, just, like, having a card that just dumps 6 in our bin is, like, really nice for those early breaches where we just need to breach for value.
Very cool, man. I mean, once again, this looks like a blast to play. I like that it's all in doing its thing, and I was looking over the mana base and the rituals. Like, everything just seems really cohesive. It looks like it does the thing it wants to do. It's not gonna get clunky with running into weird stuff with its mana. It very consistently grabs the dock side and does its thing. So I'm excited to see you actually play it. I know you had the gameplay footage up on the YouTube channel, so if people are interested in that, they definitely should go check that out.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna keep doing stuff related to this deck. I think it's, like, the real deal. I think it really has the potential to, like, change, like, what people think of when they think of Korvold.
Yeah,
I've been talking to a lot of the Korvold experts about this deck, and they've been giving me a lot of great feedback and a lot of great card ideas. Some cards I'm thinking about adding right now are, like, Slaughter Pact.
I gotta love.
Yeah, I like Slaughter Pact in this deck because it kills Dockside.
Yes.
That's, like, something I found I've wanted. Is, like, a remove. Sometimes I just want to kill a creature. Like, there's a creature on board that is kind of making things a little clunky. Maybe it's like an Eclectic Oof or a Linvala, one of those cards, and I'm kind of like, I want to deal with that, and I'm like, I don't really have anything that does that. I don't have any. If you look at my deck, it's literally Nature's Claim, Abrupt Decay, and the Blasts, and the Deflecting slot. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So one more piece of interaction probably is correct. Not sure where it'll come out of.
Yeah.
Very interaction.
Seems like a Draenith Magistrate might give you a bit of a headache.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, that's probably fair. I don't know who's going to be playing that card really, though.
The difference still blows my mind, but
I don't know. I'll probably, like, to be fair, really, like, this deck could probably win before most people can get a Draenith Magistrate out consistently. And if they're doing that, they're not being proactive. And I kind of question, like, if you're not being proactive right now, I kind of like, I don't think anyone has figured out how, I mean, like, maybe that's something you're working on personally, but I don't think anyone's figured out how to be reactive quite yet. There's a whole bunch of people playing decks that are, like, built with with old methods, and I think people know how to be reactive with those decks, but there's like a new DNA, like a new set of ideas that are slowly, like, being adopted. I'm not sure if anyone's figured out how to be reactive when people are incorporating those ideas correctly. You know, I think Blue Farm is like a very, very strong deck, and I think a lot of the, like, farm adjacent decks, like the name of this deck is Korvold Faux Farm. It's like not really a farm deck, but it acts like it takes the ideas of farm decks and abuses them. Or Nala or Kess. Like, a lot of these decks are using new ideas and are looking at the format at a completely different angle. And I'm not sure anyone has really done the same for reactive decks yet. I've tried. I've just found it a lot more fun and easy to do this, which is, doesn't make me, being lazy does not make me better. But that's just something I think is going to have to happen. People are going to have to figure out how to be reactive against this deck. Like,
yeah, I think there's definitely a balance between the things. For example, like my Dominic or Thrasios list. It is, I would not call it reactive. It's definitely an adaptive list, but it has elements of a proactive nature that allow it to keep up at a table. Yeah. And I think even the reactive decks need to be able to have something.
You have to be able to take your shot. Like,
yes,
medium
exactly.
green. The whole point of medium green is to just never take the shot. It's just to, like, hold the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't even let anyone else have it, and just hold it until you see a sliver of a moment where everyone's kind of given up, and you can just go for it with Neoform.
Yes,
that's just not, like, fundamentally does not work anymore. I think
right.
Like,
yeah,
I think
that's why I've included things like this. I've started to include things even in a 4-color green-based deck. I include Mana Vault because sometimes people are tapped out on turn 2 because they want to develop the board, and you're like, okay, I have a Seaborn Muse now. Stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's, like, a great example. I'm not sure where the line is right now for, like, I can't, like, confidently say, like, hey, you're not being proactive enough. You are being proactive enough. I think, like, even, like, one of the reasons I like Winota a lot is because it is a proactive stacks deck.
Extremely, yeah.
And so, like, that's new. That's, like, those are fundamentally new ideas. Proactive stacks decks, like, and so I think those are maybe, and Adept and I have actually tested Winota a little bit. Like, we just kind of, like, played it a bit. I don't know if you were aware of that. And Adept was not satisfied with it, but I think the deck building philosophies we were using for that deck were in the right direction. Like, we're slowly, I don't think it'll be me, but I think people are figuring out, like, and it's a minority of people. I don't think a lot of people are really aware yet of how big a difference there is between the old stacks decks and the new stacks decks you're going to have to develop. But there are some people who are figuring it out and trying. It's exciting though. I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
There's, like, a fundamental shift in the format going on right now.
It's pretty crazy, and to mention the proactive thing, like, I was playing a game the other day or yesterday where someone had to, someone literally had a win on board, and I think it was like 6 creatures that could attack and trigger Winota, and they still had to remove my creature because they were like, yeah, like, they have a win on board, but there's one more turn in between, and you are just going to win if you get these attacks off.
Yeah.
Or you will have the board completely locked out.
That's when Final Fortune gets pretty useful. It happens a lot. Yeah. I mean, in this format, it happens all the time that, like, I'm just in the wrong spot,
Ooh,
like,
I might want Final Fortune in that deck. Sorry, side note.
Winota?
Yeah.
I could see it, especially if you have that, the Goblin Mob Catcher.
Yes.
If you have Mob Catcher in play,
busted.
That's it, right? Like,
yeah, literally.
So, yeah, I think there is going to be a shift in the format that just has to happen in the next few months. I think post-Flash, and some people would argue even before Flash was banned, like, there's been a need to just fundamentally change the way you perceive the format. I still think Flash Folk was pretty broken, so I'm not sure I agree with those people, but I do think we're in a new world.
I think there is definitely a shift that exists. I think, once again, we've had open conversations about how the fact that I think you're a little farther down the rabbit hole than I am at this point, but I'm excited to be wrong and happy to see where things go.
Yeah, I think if you're playing in, like, public areas, like, for example, like, if I play on the cEDH Reddit, right, on that Discord, like, those metas can't move as fast. There's too many people, and there's too many people who are not playing every day, But, like, when your local meta plays every day, and you can be, like, you can make daily changes to your decks to adapt to each other,
Sure.
you're gonna like, and I think this is how the Finnish meta got to where they are. You're able to make faster adaptations. My playgroup I play with is made up of people who are like the most devoted out of their playgroups, right? Like,
Right.
like there's a lot of people from my playgroup in paper that aren't playing right now. They're just busy, like they're doing real life stuff.
Right.
These are they're people. These are people I'm playing with every day, or people like me, And so
Right.
like we're moving intentionally in a very specific direction because of that like daily change. And I think like the wider cEDH meta is like a much bigger ship, and to turn it is way more difficult.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know if the rabbit hole is the right way to put it. I think I'm just on a tinier ship. We can make faster
I just
adjustments.
think there is a line between like what will happen in the future and meta specific things, and I think it's interesting to walk that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like for example, like bigger changes can happen that can cause immediate changes.
Totally.
So
yes.
like
yes.
if a new card comes out that like fundamentally changes like how we have to play cEDH, like the fact that my meta was adapting faster than the larger meta doesn't matter anymore, because we all have to completely shift what our ideas of like what is good and what is bad, So like
totally.
For example, like in Zendikar Rising, I think that's the set, or the Commander set, something could come out that just completely changes cEDH, and so like me thinking
the next dockside.
like the next dockside, and so like all the advancements that we've made in our tiny meta don't really matter anymore because like something bigger has happened,
Totally. I think we covered a lot today. I don't even know if we can just call this a deck tech. But yeah, this is a really good talk, and an interesting comparison of what we're seeing in our separate metas, but also, a lot of the same conclusions we're kind of drawing in this mutual space. So
yeah, I think
it's exciting. I love talking about this part of the game.
Yeah, it's blast. There's like big things happening right now. Big things.
Now, if you are at home and you're like, man, this Korvold deck sounds like gas, and I think Braden's right, it's going to dominate the new meta. Or you're like, hey, Final Fortune, that card sounds like a real zinger. And you're like, man, I got to pick that up on TCG Player. There will be an affiliate link down below where you can help support the channel in any way possible, and it's really appreciated. So if you're going to buy stuff off TCG Player anyways, you should definitely use that. And if you're going to pick up, for some reason, a 7th edition foil Final Fortune because you want to flex on your friends, yeah, feel free to do that with our affiliate link.
Yeah, as we said, like we're looking for people who have 7th edition foil Final Fortune disease, and the only cure is buying Final Fortune 7th edition foils.
Exactly.
You are welcome here.
If you guys want to talk about decks, the evolving meta, anything like that, we have a very active Discord at the cEDH Cast Discord. That'll be in the link below. We are also on plenty of places like YouTube. We are doing a New Greedy Keeps later this evening, which will probably be out a couple days after you're hearing this. We're doing a lot of fun stuff. This is a great time to go over to our Patreon and check that out, because we are approaching one of our new quarterly meetings. We do this once every quarter, and it's our strategist level patrons and above get to sit down and for an hour or two, or maybe a little longer, depending on how much shit posting is going on. We all talk about the direction of the channel, things people want to see. We had an amazing one last time back in May, right when, the COVID nonsense was getting kind of crazy, and talking about the future of our channel. So it's awesome to be part of that meeting. So that's our strategist level patrons and above. So feel free to go check that out, patreon.com/cedhcast.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have yourselves an amazing week. Bye.